Dean Ambrose has been pretty private about his personal life, but over the years, he's pulled back the curtain. Born in December 1985, Ambrose grew up in a chaotic family. He said his father and mother would constantly yell at each other while raising him and his sister. It got so bad that when Dean was a child, his parents divorced. Despite this, Dean Ambrose described them as the greatest parents who sacrificed a lot for him and his sister. Still, life wasn't easy. Dean grew up in the East End of Cincinnati, Ohio, where shoplifting food and other essentials wasn't uncommon. Dean himself was arrested multiple times for shoplifting as a teenager. Because of this rough life, Ambrose gravitated towards wrestling, especially wrestlers like Bret Hart. At a young age, Dean Ambrose knew exactly what he wanted to do. He discovered a local wrestling company called Heartland Wrestling Association and asked the owner, Liz Thatcher, to train him. Thatcher was reluctant at first due to Ambrose's age, but Dean proved he was serious. He spent years setting up the ring, selling concessions, and doing other odd jobs. Finally, at the age of 18, Ambrose was able to get trained and wrestled his first match in 2004 under the name Jon Moxley. From there, Ambrose scratched and clawed his way up the ranks. He would work minimum wage jobs to support his wrestling career and would actually no-show work if he had the opportunity to wrestle. While there were moments of doubt, Ambrose's hard work and sacrifice paid off when he got signed to a WWE development deal in April 2011. Florida Championship Wrestling was WWE's development system at the time, and that's where the next chapter in Ambrose's career began. That's also where he'd be given the name Dean Ambrose. The Lunatic Fringe spent the next roughly year and a half honing his character until finally an opportunity to compete on the main roster presented itself. During the triple threat WWE Championship match at Survivor Series 2012, Ambrose, along with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, stormed into the ring. They beat down Ryback, one of the three competitors in the match, and concluded their attack by powerbombing the big guy through the announcer's table. This allowed the WWE Champion CM Punk to pin John Cena and retain his title. The next night on Raw, Ambrose and his two associates attacked Ryback again before the big guy could confront CM Punk. Despite their actions, the group would claim they were not working for Punk. Rather, Dean, Seth, and Roman would say they were a shield from injustice, and that's what motivated all their actions. Because of this, the three men would collectively be known as the Shield, and this is when things really started to get going. The group would then attack Kane when the Big Red Machine had a match with CM Punk. Soon, Kane's tag team partner, Daniel Bryan, also became a target of the Shield. Ryback was still an enemy of the Shield too, so it made sense to have a six-man tag team match. The match was set for the final pay-per-view of 2012, TLC, and this is where Dean Ambrose would have his first WWE match. Along with his fellow Shield members, Dean Ambrose faced Ryback and Team Hell No in a tables, ladders, and chairs match. The Shield directed his attention to Dean Ambrose, and the two continued to brawl on the outside. They eventually made it to the ring, where Dean was able to take control until Ryback knocked him down with some chops. While the Lunatic Fringe was able to get some offense in, the power of Ryback was too much. Luckily for Ambrose, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns were able to get into the ring and overpower the Human Wrecking Ball. Dean Ambrose then drop-kicked Ryback out of the ring, only to be greeted by Daniel Bryan. Like before, Dean's allies were able to help him take back control of the match. After recovering, Ryback got back on his feet and was able to get the upper hand on the Shield. Using a ladder, he started squashing Dean as well as Seth, but fortunately for them, Roman Reigns made the save. After recouping on the outside and getting some payback on Ryback, Ambrose would take out Daniel Bryan by slamming him into the ring post. As Kane was beating the crud out of Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, the Lunatic Fringe came to their aid with a dirty deed after laying Roman Reigns out. With the help of Rollins, Dean was able to subdue the Human Wrecking Ball, but the Shield's control over Ryback ended when the big guy slammed both Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose's faces into the canvas. Dean was seconds away from losing his first WWE match as Ryback was getting ready to set him and Seth up for a shell shock, but Roman Reigns prevented that from happening. The Hounds of Justice then started putting the match type to use by hitting Ryback with a chair, a ladder, and then powerbombing him through a table. The celebration was cut short when Daniel Bryan literally crashed the party, but Ambrose and his teammates recovered quickly. Kane came to the rescue of his tag team partner, but the Shield's numbers were too much. Ambrose and Rollins threw Bryan back into the ring and continued to abuse him with chairs. The two future world champions decided to take things up a notch and set up a table on top of the ropes. They brought Daniel Bryan up with them, and Dean and Seth gave the Big Red Machine the same treatment they showed his tag team partner, including a trip to the top of the table. This time, however, Kane was able to fight back and hit Dean Ambrose with a massive clothesline. After catching his breath, Ambrose broke up a pinfall attempt by Kane and continued to beat him down. Dean was rewarded with a chokeslam through a chair and a near pinfall outside, while, unbeknownst to them, Dean Ambrose was having his oxygen cut off by Daniel Bryan. The Flying Goat gave the Shield some trouble, but they put an end to it with a curb stomp onto a steel chair. Just as Dean was covering Bryan, Ryback butted in and pulled him to the outside. The man, currently known as Jon Moxley, wouldn't be straight up just chuck a chair at Ryback to knock him down. The trio wore the big guy down with an assortment of weapons before laying him on top of a table. Reigns and Ambrose started heading back to the ring, while Seth Rollins got ready to finish off Ryback for good. Even though Seth Rollins was the one who ended up going through the tables, it didn't matter. Dean Ambrose, along with Roman, grabbed Daniel Bryan and sent him crashing through a table in the ring, and the match was over. With the hard-fought battle won, Dean celebrated his Shield brothers and left the building. After their debut win, the Shield continued to be a destructive force in WWE. They would attack more and more wrestlers and even threaten WWE legends. The group also continued to aid CM Punk, despite both sides claiming they weren't working together. Despite this, the Shield make their presence felt at the 2013 Royal Rumble. Neither Dean Ambrose, nor Seth, nor Roman competed in the Rumble match, but they were part of the main event. CM Punk was defending his WWE Championship against The Rock. WWE Chairman Vince McMahon had added a stipulation that if there was outside interference, then Punk would still lose the title. However, during the match, the lights went out, and when they came back on, The Rock had been laid out. It was clear this was a sneak attack by the Shield, but more answers would be revealed the next night. Some backstage footage showed that Punk's manager, Paul Heyman, had been paying the Shield to work for him all along. After this, the Shield would quietly distance themselves from Heyman and CM Punk. The same night this information was revealed, the Shield attacked John Cena and ended up fighting Ryback and Sheamus when they ran in to make the save. Later, the Shield said they attacked Cena due to a decade of injustice. I mean, they weren't wrong. Look at what happened to Zack Ryder. Regardless, this led to Dean Ambrose and the Shield's second WWE match at Elimination Chamber 2013. The Shield ended up holding their own and defeated the powerhouse team of John Cena, Sheamus, and Ryback. After that, the Shield continued their rivalry with just Sheamus and Ryback. Randy Orton, who had been attacked by the Shield back in December, stood alongside the Celtic Warrior and the Big Guy. This set up a 3-on-3 tag team match at WrestleMania. However, the same night that match was announced, Ryback had a match with Mark Henry. The World's Strongest Man ended up giving the Human Wrecking Ball 3 World's Strongest Slams, and because of that, Raw Managing Supervisor Vicky Guerrero took Ryback out of the 6-man tag team match. Needing a third man, Sheamus and Randy Orton were joined by The Big Show, someone else the Shield had attacked weeks ago. After this, Dean Ambrose's first WrestleMania match was set in stone. Ambrose, as well as his Shield teammates, all took a beating, but some dissension amongst their rivals allowed Dean, Seth, and Roman to get the win. The night after WrestleMania, the Shield decided to try and one-up themselves and attack The Undertaker. However, the group was forced to retreat when Kane and Daniel Bryan came out. This set up a 6-man tag team match against the two sides that the Shield won. That same week, Dean Ambrose would have his first singles match in WWE when he went one-on-one with The Undertaker. Even with Reigns and Rollins at ringside, Dean couldn't defeat the Dead Man and lost by submission. However, the group did lay the Dead Man out after it was all said and done. The Shield's dominance continued, and at Extreme Rules 2013, each member had a shot at championship gold. Dean Ambrose found himself in a United States Championship match against Kofi Kingston, which Dean won and earned himself his first title in WWE. Roman and Seth would likewise win the Tag Team Championship that same night. Over the next few months, Dean Ambrose defended the title against the likes of Kane, Adrian Neville, and Rob Van Dam. While Dean would retain, he often did so via disqualification, countout, or some outside interference. Also, the first crack in the Shield formed when, in June 2013, they suffered their first clean defeat at the hands of Daniel Bryan, Kane, and Randy Orton. However, the Shield was still a strong force, so strong in fact that they began working for Triple H and the WWE Champion, Randy Orton. The Shield would do the game's dirty work while still continuing to defend their championships. Unfortunately for Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, they would lose their tag team titles in October 2013. Dean Ambrose continued to hold on to his championship, but it was still mostly by countouts and disqualifications. Despite that, Dean Ambrose began to brag that he was the only member of the Shield who was still a champion. The Shield itself remained dominant, but they started to lose more often or have matches end indecisively. The Shield's next major storyline happened in November when the group attacked CM Punk. Punk later blamed Triple H, saying that the game had sent Dean, Seth, and Roman to attack him. The game denied it, but regardless, CM Punk was put in a 3-on-1 handicap match against the trio at the final pay-per-view of 2013, TLC. What should have been an easy win for the Shield wasn't, when an accidental spear by Roman Reigns allowed CM Punk to pin Dean Ambrose. Behind the scenes, this was actually when the Shield was originally supposed to break up, but all three men wanted more time together due to their lack of experience as singles wrestlers. Back in storyline, the fallout from TLC caused more tension amongst the Shield, and it rose even more at the 2014 Royal Rumble. The Lunatic Fringe entered his first Rumble match at number 11 and made 3 eliminations, including an attempt to eliminate Roman Reigns. It didn't work out, and in fact, Reigns ended up eliminating both Dean and Seth during the match. Despite this, Roman didn't win the Royal Rumble, but resentment continued to build amongst the Shield. The night after the Rumble, the team took on Daniel Bryan, John Cena, and Sheamus in a 6-man tag team match. Whoever won would earn a spot in the WWE World Heavyweight Championship Elimination Chamber match. The Shield lost due to a disqualification by the Wyatt family, another 3-man faction. This led to a match between the groups at Elimination Chamber 2014. During the fight, Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose brawled into the crowd. After a while, Bray returned, but Dean didn't. This outnumbered Seth and Roman, and the Shield lost. Additionally, the Shield would lose a rematch a week later due to Seth Rollins walking out mid-match. Later that week, the group reconciled, and they soon had a change in direction. Kane, who was working for Triple H as part of the Authority, ordered the Shield to attack Jerry Lawler. However, the Shield ended up attacking Kane instead, and thus officially turned face, or became good guys. This led to a 3-on-3 match at WrestleMania 30, where Ambrose, Rollins, and Reigns defeated Kane and the New Age Outlaws. Now, it's worth mentioning that during all this, Dean Ambrose continued to defend and retain his United States Championship. Anyways, the night after WrestleMania 30, Triple H put himself in a match against the new World Heavyweight Champion, Daniel Bryan. However, the Shield turned on the game and attacked him. This led Triple H to reform his faction, Evolution, with Batista and Randy Orton. A match was set up at Extreme Rules, which the Shield once again won. Despite the victory, Triple H forced Ambrose to defend the United States title the next night on Raw in a 20-man battle royal. Dean survived until the very end, but was ultimately defeated by Sheamus. This wasn't the end of it though. In the following weeks, Evolution would interfere in the Shield's matches and attack them. Ultimately, Dean, Seth, and Roman challenged Evolution to a rematch at the next pay-per-view, Payback. The match was more brutal than the first, but the Shield still won. However, the war was far from over. The next night, Triple H revealed he had a plan B. With that, Seth Rollins attacked Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. Rollins later explained he didn't do it for The Rock or even Triple H. He betrayed Dean and Roman to benefit himself. Seth Rollins was now aligned with Triple H and the Authority, and thus the Shield had come to an end. At least for now. With the group now over, Dean Ambrose got a change of gear and was now purely a singles competitor. While Roman and Dean stayed friendly, they both went their separate ways following the breakup. The Lunatic Fringe was focused on revenge, and he began attacking and interfering in Seth Rollins' matches, although Seth would do the same. Both men ended up in the Money in the Bank ladder match, but due to outside interference from Kane, Seth won the contract. Dean and Seth were supposed to face off at the next pay-per-view, Battleground, but Dean got ejected from the arena after a pre-match brawl with Rollins. This ultimately led to a rematch at SummerSlam with an added stipulation. Leading up to the event, Seth and Dean would compete in Beat the Clock challenge matches. Whoever had the best time would get to choose the SummerSlam match stipulation. Ambrose defeated Alberto Del Rio in 15 minutes and 42 seconds, which wasn't great. Adding to the challenge, Rollins' opponent was supposed to be Rob Van Dam, but he got swapped out with Heath Slater at the last minute. However, Dean Ambrose distracted Seth, allowing Slater to get the upset victory. This gave Ambrose the authority to choose the match stipulation, and Dean chose a lumberjack match. However, at SummerSlam, Kane once again interfered in the match, and it ultimately cost Ambrose the win. The next night, Ambrose and Rollins fought in a rematch that went even worse. The big red corporate machine got involved for the bazillionth time, and this allowed Seth to curb stomp his former Shield teammate through cement blocks. The attack put Dean out of action for several weeks, but the Lunatic Fringe returned at the 2014 Night of Champions event. After Roman Reigns was unable to compete in his scheduled match against Seth Rollins, Seth got on the mic to brag. Dean Ambrose came out and attacked Rollins before being taken away. Soon after, Dean Ambrose defeated John Cena in a contract on a pole match to get another shot at his former Shield buddy. This time though, the match would be Hell in a Cell. While Kane was nowhere to be seen, another supernatural wrestler made his presence known. In the final moments of Ambrose and Rollins' match, the arena went dark and out came Bray Wyatt, who attacked Dean Ambrose, allowing Seth Rollins to steal another win. In the aftermath, Wyatt said he could fix Dean Ambrose, like he had done for his two previous followers, Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. Dean was not going to let Wyatt fix anything, so they fought at Survivor Series. Wyatt did technically win, but only after Dean Ambrose grabbed a steel chair and got himself disqualified. This set up a rematch between them at the Tables, Ladders, and Chairs pay-per-view. The Eater of Worlds would win that match, as well as two more in the following weeks. In total, Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt had 5 one-on-one matches, and Dean technically only won one of them. On top of that, Dean Ambrose didn't win a single match against Seth Rollins, so Ambrose's solo career wasn't off to a great start. Things didn't really get any better when the 2015 Royal Rumble rolled around. While Dean was in the match, he only spent about 10 minutes in the ring and only made one elimination, which he technically had help from Roman Reigns to accomplish. One bright spot was that, before the Rumble, Ambrose defeated the Intercontinental Champion, Bad News Barrett, in a non-title match. In the weeks after, Dean Ambrose demanded he get a championship match, but Barrett refused. Dean decided to get creative and handcuffed the champion and forced him to sign a contract for a title defense at the Fastlane pay-per-view. Once the two finally locked up, Dean got himself disqualified when he didn't back up after the ref's count of 5. Despite not winning the Intercontinental Championship, Dean Ambrose still took the belt with him on his way out. This led to a game of hot potato, as almost everyone, except Bad News Barrett, would get their hands on the IC title. Ultimately, a 7-man ladder match for the championship was set up at WrestleMania 31, and of course, Dean Ambrose was one of the participants. Dean fought well, but took a brutal bump through a ladder, courtesy of Luke Harper. Not only did this prevent Ambrose from becoming IC champion, but it also kicked off a new feud. After WrestleMania, Dean and Harper kept attacking each other and getting involved in one another's business. This set up a street fight at the next pay-per-view, Extreme Rules. The two ended up making history as, during the match, they brawled into a car and drove away mid-fight. Later in the show, Ambrose and Harper returned to the arena and finished the match, with Dean Ambrose getting the win. This match lasted nearly an hour and is actually one of the top 10 longest matches in WWE history. For Dean though, his victory over Luke Harper was his first singles win at a pay-per-view since the Shield broke up back in 2014. This was just the momentum the Lunatic Fringe needed, as about 2 weeks later, Ambrose would have another match with Seth Rollins. Rollins was now WWE champion, and while their match was non-title, if Dean beat Seth, he'd be added to the title match at Payback. Ambrose did win and joined Roman Reigns and Randy Orton in a fatal 4-way match for Seth Rollins' WWE Championship. The match at Payback featured a pretty cool moment when Roman, Seth, and Dean hit Randy Orton with a triple powerbomb through a table, an obvious homage to their days as the Shield. But interference from Kane, Jamie Noble, and Joey Mercury, who were aligned with Seth Rollins, allowed the champion to retain. The next night, Dean Ambrose demanded a one-on-one match with Rollins. When he didn't get it, the Lunatic Fringe stopped using his words and started using his fists. This proved the sword is mightier than the pen because Ambrose got his title shot at Elimination Chamber. At the end of the match though, Seth Rollins used the referee as a human shield. However, Ambrose still managed to get the pinfall on Rollins and win the WWE title. Moments after the victory, however, the decision was reversed due to the referee getting hurt. This led to an ambush by Rollins' lackeys, but Roman Reigns came out to make the save. While both Roman and Dean had stayed friendly ever since the Shield broke up, this was the beginning of a new partnership between them. In the meantime, Dean Ambrose got a rematch against Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank. The two fought in a ladder match that saw Rollins narrowly beat Dean and retain the title. The same night this happened, Bray Wyatt attacked Roman Reigns and cost the big dog the Money in the Bank briefcase. This eventually led to Luke Harper joining Bray Wyatt and partially reforming the Wyatt family. Naturally, Dean Ambrose partnered with Roman Reigns, and they fought Wyatt and Harper at SummerSlam 2015. The Shield 2/3 won the match, but the feud wasn't over. The next night, Roman and Dean fought the Wyatts in a rematch, during which a debuting Braun Strowman interfered. A 6-man match was set up at Night of Champions that featured Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Braun Strowman taking on Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, and a mystery partner. Despite what this guy thought, the mystery partner wasn't him. Instead, it was Chris Jericho. But even with Y2J on their side, the Wyatts still won. Dean and Roman would have 2 more matches against the Wyatt family with their partners being Randy Orton for one, and, ironically, Seth Rollins for another. Speaking of Rollins, the WWE Champion would get legitimately injured while wrestling in late 2015, forcing him to vacate the WWE title. This began a tournament to crown a new champion. The Lunatic Fringe made it all the way to the final round, facing off against Roman Reigns at the 2015 Survivor Series. Once again, Dean Ambrose was just one victory away from becoming the WWE Champion, but it wasn't his time. Roman Reigns won, which put an end to Dean's pursuit of the world title for the time being. Ambrose then turned his attention back to the Intercontinental Championship. In November 2015, Dean became the #1 contender for the title. Ambrose fought the champion, Kevin Owens, at the TLC pay-per-view. It was a close match, but Dean managed to slip out a win and become Intercontinental Champion. Over the next few weeks, the Lunatic Fringe successfully defended the IC title against KO and Dolph Ziggler. Dean also entered the 2016 Royal Rumble match, which was for the WWE World title. Ambrose, once again, was close to becoming WWE Champion when it came down to him and Triple H as the final two. However, it still wasn't time, and Ambrose was eliminated. Things didn't get much better, as a few weeks later, Dean Ambrose lost the Intercontinental Championship. On the positive side, Dean soon got another shot at the WWE World Championship. At Fastlane 2016, the Lunatic Fringe was put in a match against Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, with the winner facing Triple H at WrestleMania. Dean, once again, didn't win, but that was the least of his worries. The next night, Brock Lesnar attacked Ambrose, blaming Dean for costing him the world title match at WrestleMania. Later in the night, Lesnar, with his agent Paul Heyman, challenged anyone in the WWE locker room to a match at WrestleMania. An injured Dean Ambrose accepted, and it was on. Oh, and in the lead up to Mania, Ambrose fought Triple H in a WWE Championship match and lost. But did you really think Dean was going to beat Triple H? Anyways, on April 3rd, 2016, Dean Ambrose competed in his first singles match at WrestleMania. Unfortunately, it was rather underwhelming, and to make matters worse, it was another L for Dean Ambrose. After WrestleMania, Dean's next rivalry would be with a former ally. It started when the Lunatic Fringe interrupted Chris Jericho's show, The Highlight Reel. Ambrose delivered a letter saying that Shane McMahon had canceled Jericho's show and replaced it with Dean's show, The Ambrose Asylum. This also introduced Mitch the Plant, a potted plant that silently co-hosted the show with Dean. All this led to Dean Ambrose and Chris Jericho getting involved in each other's business and eventually setting up a match at Payback. Dean Ambrose won, marking his first pay-per-view win of 2016. The following night, Stephanie McMahon would cancel the Ambrose Asylum and reinstate the Highlight Reel. This prompted Y2J to attack Dean and destroy Mitch. Ambrose avenged his potted plant by attacking Jericho and ruining his jacket. Ultimately, the two fought in a rematch at Extreme Rules that being contested in an Ambrose Asylum match. Basically, it was a steel cage with weapons hanging above it. It also created a fantastic spot where Dean dropped Jericho onto a pile of thumbtacks, a rare moment during the PG era of WWE. It's not surprising then that Dean Ambrose once again was victorious. The momentum kept rolling as the next night, Ambrose qualified for the 2016 Money in the Bank match. Making things even better, Dean won it. This led to a moment not many were expecting. Later in the night, Seth Rollins fought the WWE champion Roman Reigns in the main event. Seth won, but before he could really celebrate, Ambrose cashed in and became the new WWE champion. This was one of the fastest Money in the Bank cash-ins, and it made for a memorable moment. 1 month later, Ambrose would have his first title defense against, appropriately, Seth Rollins. The match ended in controversy when both men covered each other, resulting in a double pin. Dean retained the title, but fought Seth in a rematch on SmackDown. This time, the win was decisive, with Ambrose pinning Seth Rollins. That same night, Dean was also drafted to SmackDown as part of the WWE brand split. However, Ambrose wasn't done with Rollins yet. At the next pay-per-view, Battleground, Dean defended the WWE Championship against both Rollins and Roman Reigns in a triple threat match. It was another close match, but this time, Dean came out on top, not only keeping the belt around his waist, but cementing himself as the best member of the Shield. After Battleground, a new #1 contender for the WWE Championship had to be determined. It ended up being Dolph Ziggler, who won a six-pack challenge on SmackDown. Shortly after Ziggler's win, Dean threw shade when he doubted Ziggler's ability. Although, to be fair, Dean was right, since he defeated Ziggler at SummerSlam and retained the WWE title. Ambrose's next opponent was AJ Styles, who wasn't afraid to play dirty. Dean defended his title against AJ at Backlash 2016, but lost in controversial fashion. Styles pushed Ambrose into the referee and gave the champ a low blow. This allowed the Phenomenal One to win and end Dean Ambrose's WWE title reign at 83 days. Of course, Dean Ambrose had his guaranteed championship rematch, which he utilized. However, John Cena also wanted a title shot, and since he's John Cena, he was added to the match, making it a triple threat. Unfortunately for Dean, a second world title reign was not in the cards, and he failed to win the match. In the aftermath, Dean Ambrose would continue his rivalry with AJ Styles, and even defeat him in a non-title rematch. Their feud had to be put on hold as Survivor Series approached, and SmackDown needed to put a team together to fight Raw. AJ Styles was made the team captain, and Dean Ambrose, along with 3 other SmackDown wrestlers, were part of the group. During the Survivor Series match, Dean and AJ got into an argument, which eventually turned physical. Despite the dysfunction, Team SmackDown won, thanks to Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. However, that didn't matter to Ambrose. Now, during all this, Dean Ambrose had a friendly relationship with James Ellsworth, an enhancement talent who made such a good impression that he got signed. During Dean's feud with AJ Styles, Ellsworth would get involved and actually fought and defeated Styles in a couple of non-title matches, usually with help from Dean Ambrose. With that in mind, Dean Ambrose would eventually challenge AJ Styles one-on-one for the WWE Championship at TLC. The match was fittingly a tables, ladders, and chairs match. James Ellsworth interfered, but to everyone's shock, he cost Dean Ambrose the match. Ellsworth later explained he wanted to be the one to defeat AJ for the WWE Championship, since he had already defeated him 3 times. Dean quickly got even with Ellsworth by hitting him with dirty deeds on the SmackDown after TLC. Soon after, Dean began a feud with the Intercontinental Champion, The Miz. Things were more personal than normal, as The Miz would call out Dean Ambrose's wife, WWE interviewer Renee Young. But Ambrose got his payback by not only defeating The Miz, but taking the Intercontinental Championship away from him too. That happened on the first SmackDown 2017, so the new year was off to a good start for Dean Ambrose. He soon entered his 4th Royal Rumble match, although he didn't win or make any eliminations. With the Intercontinental Championship still around his waist, Dean Ambrose participated in the WWE Championship Elimination Chamber match. During the fight, Dean Ambrose eliminated a distracted Baron Corbin. This enraged Corbin, and he attacked Ambrose and allowed Dean's former rival, The Miz, to eliminate him. In the following weeks, Dean and Baron would continuously attack each other. This led to a WrestleMania match for the Intercontinental title, although it ended up being put on the pre-show. I don't mean to play the whole WWE didn't utilize Dean Ambrose card, but the man went from facing Brock Lesnar the year before to being on the kickoff show. Unbeknownst to everyone, this would also be Dean Ambrose's final WrestleMania match. In any case, Dean defeated Baron Corbin and continued his IC title reign. After WrestleMania, WWE had the Superstar Shakeup. This saw a number of wrestlers get moved around, and one of them was Dean Ambrose. He took the Intercontinental Championship with him to Raw and restarted his feud with The Miz. It began when Dean Ambrose criticized the Universal Champion Brock Lesnar for not appearing and wrestling as often as he was. This prompted a triple threat match to be made between The Miz, Finn Balor, and Seth Rollins, with the winner becoming the #1 contender for the Intercontinental Championship. Miz won and got his title shot 2 weeks later. During the match, The Miz attempted to low blow Dean. When that didn't work, Ambrose low blowed Miz, causing a disqualification. This set up a rematch at Extreme Rules, where if Dean Ambrose lost by disqualification, he would lose the Intercontinental Championship. During the match, The Miz made multiple attempts to get himself disqualified. While they were unsuccessful, they did allow the A-lister to hit the skull-crushing finale and win the match and the championship. The next night, Dean Ambrose demanded a rematch, but was denied. This led to Ambrose ambushing The Miz, which in turn led to Dean getting ambushed by The Miz's newest henchmen, Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. Finally, Dean Ambrose was given his Intercontinental Championship rematch at Great Balls of Fire, but due to interference from both Axel and Dallas, The Miz retained the title. The following night, Ambrose went looking for payback and attacked the IC champion. Of course, Bo and Curtis stepped in, but so did Seth Rollins, who saved Dean Ambrose. Later that night, Dean returned the favor when he saved Seth from an attack by Miz's goons. The two still weren't friends though. Remember, roughly 3 years ago, Seth betrayed Dean Ambrose. Rollins had changed though, and he spent the next several weeks trying to gain his former friend's trust. During all this, the ex-Shield buddies were both having singles matches against the Raw Tag Team Champions, Sheamus and Cesaro. This led to both Dean and Seth getting attacked by the champs at the same time. This was the push the two needed, and both men were back together. Ambrose and Rollins' first match as a tag team was set for SummerSlam 2017, where they fought Sheamus and Cesaro for the titles. It was like no time had passed, as Dean and Seth won the match and the Raw Tag Team Championship. This victory also made Dean Ambrose a Triple Crown champion, and made him the first member of the Shield to accomplish that. Speaking of the Shield, there was one other guy missing from this team. After SummerSlam, Roman Reigns was a guest on Miz TV, where the A-lister insulted the Shield, saying he, Curtis Axel, and Bo Dallas could beat them. This ultimately led to Dean and Seth reuniting with Roman Reigns to beat down Sheamus, Cesaro, as well as The Miz and his crew. From there, a 3-on-5 tag team match at TLC was set up, where the Shield would face The Miz, Cesaro, Sheamus, Braun Strowman, and Kane. This was the first time the Shield had had a match since 2014, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Due to a medical issue, Roman was taken out of the match. Instead, Raw General Manager Kurt Angle was added in. Even with a new teammate and the numbers not being in their favor, Dean, Seth, and Kurt won. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Not long after, Ambrose and Rollins had a rematch against Sheamus and Cesaro, during which the New Day appeared in the crowd. The reason for this was that Survivor Series was coming up, and Raw and SmackDown would go toe-to-toe for brand supremacy. The distraction from the New Day, who were on SmackDown, resulted in Dean and Seth losing their Raw Tag Team Championship. Although this was a setback, it didn't last long. A week later, Seth and Dean would team up with Roman Reigns, who had recovered from his medical issue, and the Shield was finally back together. In their first match back as a team, the Hounds of Justice defeated Sheamus, Cesaro, and The Miz. To top things off, the Shield also defeated the New Day at Survivor Series. The group spent the next few weeks feuding with Sheamus, Cesaro, as well as Samoa Joe, but the Shield could not get past the injury bug. In December 2017, Dean Ambrose suffered a major injury when he hurt his triceps. This put Ambrose out of action for a whopping 9 months, causing him to miss the first half of 2018. In August of that year, Seth Rollins was feuding with the Intercontinental Champion, Dolph Ziggler. The two were set to have a match at SummerSlam with Drew McIntyre in Ziggler's corner. Rollins knew he needed someone to watch his back, which led to the return of Dean Ambrose. Thanks to help from Dean, Rollins was victorious in his SummerSlam match. The next night, Ambrose and Rollins aided Roman Reigns when he was attacked by Braun Strowman, officially reforming the Shield for a second time. This led to 3 matches between the Shield, Strowman, Ziggler, and McIntyre, 2 of which were won by the Hounds of Justice. Shocking real-life news, though, would derail whatever plans WWE had for the Shield. On October 22nd, 2018, Roman Reigns kicked off Monday Night Raw. He revealed that he had leukemia earlier in his life, and it was back. The big dog announced he was leaving WWE indefinitely until he was healthy again. Later that same night, Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins faced Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre, who are now the Raw Tag Team Champions. Dean and Seth won, but after the victory, Dean attacked Seth Rollins, making Ambrose a heel for the first time since the Shield's original run. Dean didn't explain his actions right away. However, this meant that Seth Rollins had to defend the Raw Tag Team Championship on his own. That didn't go so well, and after losing the titles, Dean Ambrose came out and attacked Seth again. The following week, the Lunatic Fringe said the Shield made him weak and burned his vest to symbolize him being done with the group. Dean would continue to stalk Seth Rollins, but would also do some odd stuff, like getting vaccinated to save himself from Seth's illness. Dean even wore a gas mask and had a SWAT team attack Rollins at one point. Ambrose and Seth would eventually have 2 singles matches against each other. The first was in a steel cage, which Seth won. The second was at the last pay-per-view of 2018, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, where Dean won and became a 3-time Intercontinental Champion. In the following weeks, Ambrose defended the IC title against Apollo Crews, Tyler Breeze, and a rematch with Seth Rollins, all of which saw Dean retain. However, on the second Raw of 2019, Dean lost the title in a triple threat match to Bobby Lashley that Seth Rollins was also a part of. The feud with Rollins continued into the 2019 Royal Rumble. Dean entered at number 19, and the first person he targeted was Seth Rollins. Despite this, it was actually Aleister Black that eliminated the Lunatic Fringe. Rollins did go on to win the 2019 Royal Rumble, but Dean wasn't done. The night after the Rumble, Ambrose confronted Seth Rollins and pointed out that Seth hadn't defeated him clean in a one-on-one match. An impromptu match between the former Shield mates was set up. This time, however, Seth Rollins won, and won decisively. After the match, Dean Ambrose stayed in the ring. Before he could say what he wanted to, though, he was confronted by Nia Jax. Jax then attacked Dean, and he was escorted to the back. This seemed pretty random, and it was, but a day later, we would learn why this happened. It was reported that Dean Ambrose would not be renewing his WWE contract, which was set to expire in a few months. Ambrose's reason for not signing was because of frustrations he had with WWE's creative direction for him, especially with his recent heel turn. For whatever reason, WWE decided to announce that Dean Ambrose wasn't renewing his contract, and this was acknowledged on TV. The following episode of Raw saw Dean Ambrose butt heads with Nia Jax again, as well as newcomers to the main roster, EC3, which led to this iconic moment.
Where are EC1 and 2?
The two then immediately wrestled a match that EC3 won in under 3 minutes. The next week, however, Dean Ambrose did avenge his loss by beating EC3 in a rematch. Before that though, Ambrose confronted Seth Rollins, who was getting ready to face Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship at WrestleMania. Ambrose simply told Seth to
slay the beast.
This signaled that Ambrose's time as a heel was coming to an end. 2 weeks later, Dean Ambrose had a no disqualification match against Drew McIntyre. However, due to interference by Elias, McIntyre, Elias, and Corbin were attacking Roman and Seth. This officially reunited the Shield. The Hounds of Justice had their first match together just 6 days later at Fastlane. That saw them defeat Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, and Baron Corbin in a 6-man tag team match. Despite the victory, Dean Ambrose would continue to lose while on his own. After Fastlane, Ambrose fought Drew McIntyre another 2 times and lost on both occasions. If you're keeping track, Ambrose lost to Drew 4 times in the span of about a month. Likely because he was leaving WWE, Dean was left off of WrestleMania 35. However, on the Raw after WrestleMania, Ambrose was set to have his final match on WWE's flagship show. Dean's opponent was Bobby Lashley, but the match didn't happen. This is due to Lashley insulting Ambrose's wife, Renee Young, leading to a brawl that saw Dean get powerbombed through the announcer's table. However, Dean Ambrose would get his revenge a few weeks later when WWE held a special live event called The Shield's Final Chapter. Not only would this be the end of The Shield, but it also marked the end of Dean Ambrose's WWE career. Dean Ambrose, alongside Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, had a rematch with their Fastlane opponents, Drew McIntyre, Baron Corbin, and Bobby Lashley. Before the match, the Shield's adversaries got on the mic to say that the Shield is definitely not going to win. Sure, guys. Finally, Ambrose, Rollins, and Reigns came out. Complete with their Shield attire, theme music, and iconic entrance, they headed for the ring. Seth Rollins got the match started for the team, and Baron Corbin did the same for his side. Things started slow, but as soon as Dean Ambrose got the tag, they picked up. The Lunatic Fringe whipped Corbin all around the ring until the Lone Wolf got out and brought in Bobby Lashley. It made little difference, as Dean was on a roll, and before long, he tagged Rollins back in, who was immediately tagged out by Roman Reigns. After spending a short time in the ring, the big dog tagged Ambrose back into the match. Without missing a beat, Ambrose bounced all around the ring and took the fight to the outside by hitting the Chosen One with a suicide dive. The momentum shifted when Lashley and Corbin got a few cheap shots in while the ref's back was turned. With the match now in McIntyre's control, he tagged out and got a fresh Bobby Lashley in to hammer away on Dean. After spending about a minute as the legal man, the Almighty tagged out and brought Baron Corbin back in. With fight still in him, Dean Ambrose took Corbin down to the mat and locked in the figure 4, but the Lone Wolf's teammates got him out by distracting the referee and raking Dean's eyes. McIntyre then got tagged, which created an opening for Ambrose after he countered a suplex from the Scottish Psychopath. It wasn't enough to tag in either Reigns or Rollins though, as the Shield's enemies made sure there was space between Dean Ambrose and his teammates. The 3 villains of the match once again threw Dean to the outside and beat him down while the referee was distracted. This time, however, Roman Reigns marched over with a chair in hand, which obviously caused Ambrose's attackers to flee. Once things calmed down, Drew McIntyre was back in the ring with Dean Ambrose. With enough time to build some energy, Ambrose hit a neckbreaker and tagged a fully charged Seth Rollins into the match. The Kingslayer, as well as Roman Reigns, both hit an onslaught of moves and helped get the match back on the Shield side. The 2016 Money in the Bank winner finally got the tag and entered the match with an elbow drop. Unfortunately, Lashley, McIntyre, and Corbin quickly started to regain their dominance, but with some help from Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose was back in charge. Once the ring had been cleared, Dean planted the legal man, Baron Corbin, with one final Dirty Deeds. The match officially came to a close when all 3 members of the Shield got together and hit the triple powerbomb. After gaining the victory, Ambrose got on the mic and talked about never giving up and used Seth and Roman as examples. It was a really heartfelt way to end the event and a great way to say goodbye to Dean Ambrose. So, after finishing up an 8-year career in WWE, what was next for Dean Ambrose? Well, in addition to wrestling in New Japan and on the independent scene, Ambrose debuted in All Elite Wrestling at the Double or Nothing event. He reverted back to his Jon Moxley name and has been one of the company's top stars ever since. It's unknown if we'll ever see the return of Dean Ambrose, but one guy who will probably never return to WWE is Brock Lesnar. To see his first and last matches, watch the video on screen. Also, shout out to Gavin.